swear to God, the next person who says there's no ethical consumption under capitalism is getting a knife to the throat. I am handing out punches. Today we're serving at the Get Bent Cafe.
These days, just buying a tomato at a grocery store means that you are unwittingly supporting toxic pesticides, exploiting labor, contributing to global warming. Humans think that they're making one choice, but they're actually making dozens of choices they don't even know they're making.
Your big revelation is life is complicated? That's not a revelation. That's a divorced woman's throw pillow.
I'm pretty sure the idea behind there's no ethical consumption under capitalism was to remove the blame and responsibility off the poor and the working class and instead hold large corporations, billionaires, and greedy governments accountable. I understand fully that it's pretty much impossible for any one individual to single-handedly save the world. But a lot of people have taken no ethical consumption under capitalism as permission to just consume as unethically as possible. And don't worry, I'm not here to yell or shame anyone for their purchasing decisions or how they choose to live their life, especially because I know that criticizing a 20,000 rand Shein haul makes you a racist, classist, fat-phobic dictator who thinks poor people should choke and die. Never mind the fact that fast fashion corporations like Shein continually threaten the health, safety, and welfare of poor people across the world. It's so much more important that lower to middle class people can finally have their human right of being fashionable and trendy. After all, the internet is not a symposium, it is a gladiator pit. Because after all, it is poor people famously who are the ones spending thousands and tens of thousands of dollars, pounds, and rands on plastic shoes and polyester tops that melts in the sun or fall apart after one wash. They've always just been so quirky like that. In 2022, it was found that the most popular brand in the world is Shein. Google search data revealed that in 113 countries, the ultra-fast fashion retailer beat out H&M, Nike, Zara, and Adidas for the world's attention, which isn't surprising at all if you've been outside at least once in the past 2 years, but it's pretty alarming that out of 54 African countries, Shein dominates almost 90% of the continent. There's 7 countries where Shein wasn't number one, and I'm pretty sure it was probably a close second. And I'm gonna be real honest here. I really don't get why. I just don't understand it. Okay, hold on. I understand why it's popular. It's cheap and trendy, what's not to like. It's also clothing that's favored by both rich and poor people alike. And obviously in a place like South Africa where a 4,000 rand salary basically makes you upper middle class, it makes total sense why people wouldn't be able to resist a 65 rand top. And making the kind of mass bulk purchases that less than a decade ago you would have had to be a multi-millionaire or just really, really good at fraud, which I guess a lot of people still probably are. What's wild to me is that they've been able to get away with some of the most heinous crimes in recent fashion history. And let me tell you that the way Shein operates makes Zara and Boohoo look like Greenpeace. Zara and H&M may have pioneered the fast fashion model, but Shein's taken it to the most uncomprehendable of heights. It's not even a they walked so Shein could run kind of comparison, because Zara and H&M are the equivalent of a caveman making fire for the first time by banging rocks, and Shein is just dropping atom bombs for fun. You know what I mean? Imagine the absolute heart attack a caveman would have if he had to see nuclear weaponry. Last year, they were valued at 100 billion, as in 100 billions with a B, dollars, which is the value of Zara and H&M combined. If you had to stack $100 billion bills, a single dollar bill all on top of each other, it would be a 100-kilometer tall tower. That's literally tall enough to touch the outermost layer of the Earth's atmosphere. It's such an obscene amount of money. For context, if you had to lay each dollar bill out on the floor, that's 80 OR Tambos or 200,000 rugby fields. And Zara's claim to fame was its ability to have a 4-week lead time, which I guess now today is absolutely laughable. But that was 28 days to design, manufacture, ship, package, and then have an item in stores worldwide for people to shop. And at its height, Zara was producing something like 1,000 items a month, or releasing 1,000 new items a month. Shein releases 1,000 items in the first 4 hours of the day. Like, it's not even comparable. And you might guess the ability to release 1,000 to 6,000 items in a single 24-hour period cannot ever, not once, not ever be done ethically, safely, and sustainably. There's lead and toxic chemicals in the clothes they make for literal children. We've seen that their shoes melt under pretty regular weather conditions. They're frequently plagiarizing designs and products. Their app has been caught tapping people's phones. The workers in their supplier factories were found working 18-hour days for literal cents and the threat of violence in 4K. And they've been linked to actual slavery. And it's actually only really recently, as in like a couple of weeks ago, that we're starting to see the powers that be taking them to task. I do understand that because Shein is such a mysterious and like non-transparent company, it's very difficult for anyone to get any evidence or any like specific finite details exactly about their operational structure and their business model, which is why it's also so difficult for a lot of like NGOs and the organizations that do regularly investigate Shein to make a lot of headways. But in a really rather pleasant surprise, I'm actually very happy to be where I'm from, because South Africa recently became the first government in the world to launch an official investigation into Shein. The investigation isn't so much about like the labor violations or the use of toxic chemicals in its clothing, but more relating to Shein's very shady business practices. So like, a fun fact about Shein, because I know you're dying to know, is that it actually has to keep its clothing really, really cheap in order to exploit tax loopholes around the world. Basically, because Shein kind of like categorizes its customers as importers to whom it's a supplier, and because these goods are individually wrapped and they're low cost, they don't have to pay the kind of tariffs, taxes, and duties that most retailers do when they bring items into the country. Now, don't quote me too much on this because I'm not like a tax guy, I'm a fashion uncle. But if you've seen my video about why we shouldn't shame poor people about fast fashion, you'll already know that a lot of those import tariffs and those taxes and duties were put in place in order to protect domestic business from cheap and foreign competition. During the apartheid era, South Africa had a booming clothing and textile industry, part of this being because of like world wars and economic sanctions, meaning that we had to be like incredibly self-reliant. And as such, clothing and textiles was a really huge part of our economy. Unfortunately, the kind of incentives and protections that the apartheid government had put in place to support this industry also made the local industry very lazy and uncompetitive. And during the Mbeki administration, cheap, mostly Chinese imports were introduced to the country for the first time, and this absolutely wrecked our fashion industry. You can see it in all the abandoned like mills and factories across Joburg, Kimberley, Durban, Cape Town. You could see it in how there's a large group of people who are highly skilled in sewing and garment construction and clothing manufacturing in general who cannot find employment. You can see it in how it's so difficult for any young, independent local designer to scale their business and be able to offer good quality, locally made clothing. That's why so many people often resort to importing from overseas and having to travel out to get these kinds of things. We are a little bit better now, but it's taken almost over 2 decades to recover. Ironically, part of this is thanks to local fast fashion like TFG and Mr. Price, but we're still not in the position to adequately compete. We're not even close to the position where we were during the apartheid years, and for that reason you can see why the Southern African Clothing and Textile Workers Union and the National Clothing Retail Federation of South Africa, those are long names, are bringing this issue forward.
We are very concerned about Shein's entry and its growth as well. We think it's bad for jobs, we think it's bad for workers, we think it's bad for the economy, and we think it's bad for the environment. And so the more this company is accessing South Africa and taking up market share, the more it means that our efforts as the industry together with the retailers, our efforts to grow jobs in terms of our master plan is being undermined.
They suspect that Shein's probably paying as little as 10% in tariffs and taxes when it should be closer to something like 50%, which is what our local retailers are probably paying when they import their garments. Interesting enough, I did find out that like about 30% of the garments from our big retailers are at least locally made, and there are plans to increase this, which is really good. And also thanks to former US President Donald Trump, Shein is also exempt from like Chinese VAT and the kind of corporate taxes they'd have to pay inland there. So the company was actually founded in China, but I think they're now based in Singapore. But because they've continued to keep their factories and supplies in China, and because they bring so much money to the Chinese economy, when the great like trade war began with the Big Orange and China, in the most like simplified explanation for someone who doesn't understand numbers, it basically invited the Chinese government to provide businesses like Shein with a bunch of like really hectic incentives to keep exporting products overseas, which is hilarious because I'm pretty sure the whole point of that entire trade war was to prevent the dominance of Chinese products. And now Shein is literally everywhere. I'm not sure what's gonna come out of the South Africa investigation or if it will even really make an impact. Like, I know how things in my country operate. I'm not stupid. But what I do think is really important is that African countries and organizations and people especially are at the forefront of combating the fast fashion crisis. Not in the sense that it is our fault, but it's like the same vulnerabilities that make us really easy targets for corporations like Shein, also the same vulnerabilities that are going to make us first in line to suffer the consequences of the global north's abuse of the planet. Like, I totally understand that we're not the biggest contributors to climate change, but we are the ones who are going to deal with it in the most difficult ways. And fine, for the sake of being fair and balanced, I am aware that Shein has a few sustainability initiatives in place, but like, I see through that. Okay, that's all just blatant greenwashing. 2021, Shein investigated its own environmental impact for the first time and found that it amounted to 6.3 million tons of carbon emissions, for which they're aiming to reduce to 1.25 million tons within the decade. They've also dedicated 7.6 million in order to achieve this goal, along with another $15 million to the All Foundation, which is an NGO tackling fashion waste in Ghana, which is important since over 15 million secondhand garments land in Ghana from the global north every year, 40% of which is absolute garbage that just ends up in landfills for which they are unable to handle and properly deal with. But like, I put 7.6 million plus $15 million into a calculator, and Google says that's not even 5% of the 100 billion Shein's valued at. These sustainability promises are not accompanied with tangible, transparent, actionable plans to reduce their outputs, source better materials, invest in textile recycling or textile recycling technology and research, or, you know, just the basics of ensuring their factories are paying workers a living wage. They have not taken real, like, viable, credible ownership of their supply chains beyond dropping what is like 0.2% of their entire value on like 2 little greenwashing projects. Did you know that they are like secret Shein warehouses and like brick and mortar shops in South Africa? And it's not people like reselling the products they got online, but like huge bales of Shein items that are significantly cheaper than what's listed on the website. Namolina made a really great investigation into this on her YouTube. It's like watching Third Degree, but you don't want to punch Deborah Patz in the face. And she basically reveals that Shein is producing in such excessive amounts, in such a massive overflow, that they can actually afford to dump huge piles of unsold inventory for next to nothing here. And I'm pretty sure that's not like illegal, but it definitely shows you that you can't take any of their sustainability claims seriously. Part of the reason why Shein is able to list like 6,000 styles a day is that they basically do like a bunch of like A/B testing on the website. They keep a lot of their manufacturers really close by. I think it's something like a 5 hours driving distance in order to be able to ship all these items really fast. But they'll do like a really small batch of orders from a manufacturer, factory, or supplier somewhere, put that up on the website straight away, see what the interest is, and then depending on whether the item's really popular or not, then they'll put it into like mass production or absolutely cancel it. The problem is that for a lot of these suppliers and factories is that then they end up with a lot of unsold inventory, which is actually their burden and not Shein's. Like, they have to find a way to deal with all of that, which then is how you get them kind of dumping bucket loads of that in places like South Africa, where people now have turned that into businesses for themselves, which I'm not gonna like rag on or get into too much. I understand where we live and I understand the need to be able to make money in whatever ways you can, but it's absolutely just so reflective of the way Shein actually treats the world and the people it engages with, not just its suppliers but its customers. Like, these people have no respect or appreciation for the earth or the planet, and I just think you should keep that in mind if you see any more greenwashing from this company.
Obviously, Earth is cancelled.
And mind you, bestie, when the droughts, fires, and the floods arrive, which, not to scare you, but they will, South Africa is in no way prepared to handle that. We barely have electricity as it is, and that's not even a climate-related issue. Currently, we're in 92nd place on the ND Gain Index, which is a ranking of countries according to the least to most like vulnerable and unprepared for climate change related disasters. There's 181 countries on this list, with Norway at number 1 as the most prepared and least vulnerable for a climate change related disaster. And then we're almost at the bottom because we're about to get absolutely completely bent when things start to shake. We're also the 5th most water scarce country in the world, not just on this index. And if global temperatures continue to rise, we're going to be knee deep in soil erosion, land degradation, drought, and the loss of really important agriculture and lifestyle, which obviously has a lot of knock-on effects in terms of food security and public health and safety and just general standards of living. So like, yeah, we're in danger, girl. That's why this stuff is serious, and that's why it matters. And I'm not bringing this up, I promise, to scare you or make you feel like this is a problem for you alone to handle. I know you're not Superman. You're like 10 times hotter than him. I'm not even here to get you to stop shopping from Shein, even though I do think it would be really sexy if you did. I know it's really pointless to like yell at people and try to shame them into making new decisions. And I also do feel like the fact that there was a huge dip in Shein's 2022 sales shows that a lot of people are kind of changing their attitudes or the way they engage with this brand. And even though there's this investigation from our government and there are rumors of Shein possibly receiving the same kind of ban TikTok might get in America, I know all of this can feel and can sometimes be like battling a hydra. You cut the head off of one and another 2 more hungry, mean motherfuckers will grow in its place. Above all, I just think it's really important that people can at least make informed decisions, that when you make your choices, you're fully aware of all of the repercussions and you decide for yourself which of those consequences you are the most comfortable with and which of the ones you can handle the most, and just basically doing what makes sense for you, you know? Like, I know that no one could ever truly be super sustainable and ethical in every single thing that they do. Like, I can't do that either, but it's still really valuable and important and worthwhile to at least try your best. You know, being empowered, being able to have some control, even if it just means choosing the less of 2 evils, just not making necessarily the best decision, but making what is the better decision for yourself and your values and your beliefs. And sometimes that better decision is buying a fast fashion item, but you make sure that you take really good care of it for many, many years. Sometimes it is shopping less or not at all. Sometimes it's opting to rent a dress instead of buying a new one, or learning how to alter and mend your own clothes, or if you have it, donating money to an organization or a charity. I think these individual actions still really matter, and that they need to exist alongside the big stuff, like getting corporations, billionaires, and governments to act. I don't think anyone has to be perfect, but I think that we can all at least be good. So that, you know, it's not just that there's like no ethical consumption under capitalism. I just think that's like a very limited way to look at things, because you exist as more than your consumption. You don't only wake up in the morning to buy things. You know what I mean? You have so many other valuable contributions to the world, and I think you can instead focus on that. Like last week I was at this like sustainability talk, and Modupe of I Write African, no, that's her Twitter handle, but Modupe, who publishes the newsletter African Fashion Weekly, mentioned how like too often when we talk about sustainability in fashion, we talk about all the things it's taking away from us, and we're not giving enough consideration to all of the things that it gives to us and all of the things that we get out of it. And I think it's really important to not frame things like not shopping from Shein anymore, or shopping from Shein less, or, you know, boycotting Shein as a sacrifice you're making, but think of that as like something good that you're putting out into the world. Like, I think about the fact that on at least like 5 different occasions recently, I will like speak to someone and I'll be like, oh, nice top, or I like your shoes, and then they'll be like, oh my god, thanks, but you're like absolutely gonna hate me when I tell you where it's from. And I'm always like, okay, where's it from? And they're like, oh my god, it's from Shein. And I'm just like, okay, what do you want me to say? Like, what do you want me to do? You expect me to like yell, scream like huff and puff? Do you want me to turn red? Like, one, I could never hate anyone for the choices they make, and also you guys are very generous, because I'm way too self-involved to spend all my time thinking about other people's decisions. And like, I don't lie awake at night in my bed like counting names off of a list for people who had bought from Shein, like Arya Stark, like listing her kill list. You know, I'm not there like Joffrey, Cersei, Limpane, the Hound, you know. And it's just interesting to me, because it's also like, why do you think I'd be upset with that? Like, what is it about this decision you've made to purchase from Shein that you think would make me angry? Because that also reveals to me that then you're fully aware of some of the human rights violations, the environmental impact, and a lot of the shady things surrounding this company, but you've still chosen to shop from them, and that's fine. But you don't have to externalize your guilt or some sense of shame onto me. I am not thinking about you like that, I promise. And I think then that's a reflection that you're not 100% happy with the decision you've made for yourself. And like I'm saying is that, like, I think it's just the most important thing is to make decisions that you can go to bed at night with. And if it makes you feel uneasy to be buying from Shein or talking about the fact that you purchased from there, then like maybe don't, maybe stop. I don't know. But again, like, I'm really not here to try and change anyone's behavior. I think that's a waste of my breath and my time. I'm mostly concerned that I, myself at least, can try and do better in the ways that I can, and that I am comfortable with my decisions. I can only hope for the same for other people, and that's about it.
Your big revelation is life is complicated? That's not a revelation. That's a divorced woman's throw pillow.
Anyway, you can keep up with me on like the social media and stuff. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at OKBaddyK, or you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is called Hanger Management. As usual, everything I've like referenced or spoken about is linked in the description, along with any other links that you might need. Yeah, I'm gonna check my imaginary watch because I actually know that I'm super late for work right now, so I'm gonna go.